In this video, we're going to talk about functions in C Sharp. We talked about them a little bit before when we started the unit on C Sharp, how we still have them, they still have inputs, they can still produce outputs, but the syntax is a little different. So let's go kind of revisit that. Now, when you create a console application in Visual Studio, what you'll get is a class called program. So your program is an object, and it's called program. And your program is given a function by default. And this is the starting address, or the starting point for your program. Your program will start running here. And you'll see this is actually a function. Now, there's some weird stuff in here. What does static mean? Well, static means that this code is not really associated with any particular object. We're not going to really get into that stuff yet or ever. Void means that this function does not return a value. It doesn't return an integer, a success code. It doesn't find you an object. It just doesn't return any kind of object to whoever calls it. Its name is main, and then after the name of the function, we have the arguments, the inputs, the parameters to this function. They are supplied inside the parentheses. And the name of this parameter, the one parameter that this function takes, is called args. And this thing right here is the type. It's the data type. So what this says, this is a string array. So the open and closing square brackets there denote an array. An array is like a list, or it's like a fixed size list of things. And don't worry about that yet, though. So this is a function that returns no value. It's called main, and it takes one parameter called args, and args is an array of strings. It's a group of strings. What is that for? Well, when you run a command on the command prompt, a lot of times you specify some information, how to run this command, what specific mode should it be running in, what specific thing do you want it to do, and this information, the parameters that you specify after the name of the command, when you run this command, those get packaged up and passed in as the first parameter. So this is a mechanism for getting arguments or information off of the command line for doing command line stuff. We're not going to be using it, but that's what it's for. Now, there's a rule that we're going to have to work around here, and that's that static functions can only call other static functions. And as a general rule, we do not want our stuff to be static. So if I just made a function called run, and I'll do that right now. I'll make a function called void, or it returns no value. That's what void means, no value, no return value. I'll call it run. It takes no parameters. So there's a function called run inside of the class program. So program now has a main function and it has a run function. Up here, if I try to use my run function, you will see it says, gives me an error. Object reference is required for the non-static field method or property run. So what this is, there's a rule here that says static functions can only call other static functions. The way to fix this is not to make this a static function. We don't want our functions to be static unless they really should be. What we're going to do is make a program and call its run function. So let's do that. We're going to make a program called p equals new program, and then we can call that program's run function. There you go. So now let me just to show you that this is working here. Down here, I'm going to have it print out a message, and if I just type CW and hit tab twice, that'll expand to console.writeline, and I'll say in the run function. Okay, so now I'm going to run this, but before I do that, I'm going to put some breakpoints in my program, and I just hit F9 to get it to do that. And now when I run my program by hitting F5, you will see that my program, I think I ran the wrong program. I ran the wrong program. All right, let me fix that. There we go. So our program starts in the main method, and now we're going to make a new program, and now we're going to execute the run function. So if I hit F11, then I'll step into that function, and you can see now that now I'm down in the run function. I do the run function, I print out my message, and now I return. I come back to where I was, and now I'm done. So if I pop over to this console here, you can say, you see it jumped into the run function, did whatever it was inside there, and then jumped back. That's what a function call is. So there's a void function, that's a very simple function. It returns nothing and takes in nothing. Now let's make another function. I'll make a function called square. Now I'll make a function called sum. And it will take three integers, a, b, c. And let me make this a void function for now. Then we'll get progressively more complicated. So it'll take three parameters, an integer called a, an integer called b, and an integer called c. And then let's just print out what the sum is. A plus b plus c equals, and then I'll just append, well, I'll just add them all up. A plus b plus c. You know what? Maybe I need to put parentheses around that. You know what? Maybe I'll just to make that a little more clear, I'll make an integer variable called sum, and I'll set it equal to a plus b plus c, and then I'll just say a plus b plus c equals the sum. So it's actually going to print out a plus b plus c, because this is all in quotation marks, and then it's going to append or tack on what the sum was. So now let me go up here and run that. And let's see what happens. What doesn't it like? Oh, yeah, silly me. I've got to give it some numbers to sum up, right? So there's an example of now that would have worked, and it would have run in Lua, but it would have produced the wrong answer. It would have given zeros for all of these things. So let me just add up 10 numbers here, 10, 20, 30, and let me run it. Okay, so now you'll see we'll go into our sum function. I stepped in there with F11. I'm hitting F10 to walk through my code. I declare an integer variable called sum, and I set it to a plus b plus c. Sum is now 60, so it'll print out a plus b plus c equals 60 on the command line. So there's a function that takes three inputs and produces no output. And then let's change this so that it actually does produce an output. So this function will return an integer. And I can clone most of this. So instead of actually printing it out, what I'll do is I'll return that value. I'll give it back to the person who made the function call. So I'll say return sum. Now here I've declared, why is it not happy? Type, because I can't have two functions with the same parameter list, because the thing will get confused. So I'll just comment this one out here for a second. We'll just say we're only going to have one sum function. So this will, so this will take in the three values, add them all up, and then return them. So up here, if I want to use my sum function, 10, 20, 30, if I just did this, what would happen? Well, I would jump into that function, add all those numbers up, I would get my answer, but then the answer is getting thrown away. I'm not saving it anywhere. So what I probably want to do is make a variable and hold on to whatever came back from that function. Save the answer in a variable. And then let me print it out. CW tab tab. The sum was sum. All right. Now let's run this and see what happens. I'm going to put a breakpoint here using F9, and I'm going to run my code. So now let's, oh, you know what? Is that going to work? Yeah. Run. Is that what I wanted? Let me get rid of this. There you go. All right, so I just want to do everything in my run function. Okay, so now if I'm going to step into that code, and you'll see I'm going to add up all of those numbers, a plus b plus c. I'm going to store them in this variable called sum, and now I'm going to give that variable back to whoever made the function call. And you can see now what this is doing is it's taking whatever this function returns, whatever this evaluates to, it's going to assign it into this variable called sum. Sum is now 60, and now we'll print it out. So if I go to the console, you can see the sum was 60. So there's an example of some different functions, right? You can have a function like this run function here that does not take any inputs, does not produce any outputs. It just kind of does some stuff for you. You could have a function that takes inputs and still does not produce any output, like that one right there. It just adds up a number and prints it. Or you could take some parameters, do something to them, and then produce an output and give that back to the caller. So there's some examples of how to write some simple functions. Now, anytime you do one of these console apps and you want to call functions, you're going to have to do this thing. Make a new program, make a run function like this, and then put these two lines in your main function, and then call do all your stuff down here and run. And then you won't run into that problem with it says like an instance is required. So anytime you are going to make a function or make a program that's going to be writing functions or using functions, you're going to have to do this trick with the make a new program and call its run function, and then actually create a run function. So there you go. That's some examples of just how to write some simple functions in C#. It's almost identical to Lua. The real difference is you explicitly have to define what that function gives you back, if anything, and the parameters that come into that function have to have types, because C# is a strongly typed language, whereas Lua was not. And that's kind of it. So, all right, hopefully that was useful, and some exercises after this I'll have you writing some simple functions.